A recent survey reveals nearly half of registered practical nurses are considering leaving the profession due to overwhelming workloads and worsening patient care. Joining us live to discuss their findings is CEO of WeRPN, Dianne Martin. Dianne, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for giving us an exclusive look at these numbers, because again, healthcare is one of the main issues that we've been talking about here across the country, especially in the province. When you hear the number, nearly half of RPNs are considering leaving. I mean, what's going through your mind as someone who's advocating for these positions?
Mostly fear.
Yeah.
We're not just advocating for nurses, we're potential patients as well. And when you look at it through that lens, all of us should be concerned about what might greet us if we ever needed any sort of care. But nursing used to be, my mom was a nurse. She was a nurse for life. I've been a nurse my whole life. My daughter is a nurse, and I don't hold out a lot of hopes that she's going to be able to withstand what she's facing every day right now in the workplace throughout an entire career. It's just become a situation where nurses do the very best they can until they can no longer.
What are some of the stats that were revealed by this study regarding the conditions that nurses are working in?
So what we found was that, for example, 77% of those considering leaving cited workload. A fairly significant number, very close to that, mentioned the pay. You know, during the period of time where Bill 124 was in place, nurses fell behind in wages, but particularly registered practical nurses whose roles actually quite close to that of a registered nurse, but their pay has remained very close to a PSW, with nobody showing any appetite to help that group of people. And that's reflected in the numbers that we're seeing. Unfortunately, the government in question period last week, I was actually in question period, said that they had brought 17,700 new nurses into the workforce. The reality is that we had a net number of maybe 5,000 RNs, and we have a negative 400 RPNs. So at the very time that we know we have to grow this workforce, we see diminishing numbers in the case of practical nurses, less practical nurses than ever before. And practical nurses are the primary caregivers, nursing care providers for our elderly. And with an aging population, we can see that the disaster is only growing.
Now, the province has mentioned over the last few months the fact that they are trying to improve the ways in which internationally trained nurses can come on board and work here in Ontario. Are you seeing that turn into more staffing, or are there still challenges they're facing too? So
there's a lot of new graduates from here and new internationally educated nurses. And I think one of the important things to note is that when you have new grads, new internationally educated nurses in your system, you need experienced nurses who take them by the hand and help them learn what we learn on the job to gain the experience. That sense of judgment that nurses have where they know something's wrong but they don't know why they know it, that comes from experience. You can't keep filling up a bucket that has an empty hole at the bottom. If you're losing your experienced nurses, it's not going to matter how many you bring in. You have to stop the loss of the experienced nurses. And receiving care from, and I feel so bad for our new nurses who haven't had that opportunity to gain that experience. That is not an ideal situation for patients.
Right. And lastly, because we're running out of time here, but you talked about pay increases potentially to keep some RPNs here in the positions that they're currently filling. You know, we just heard that long-term care nurses got an 11.5% raise over the next 2 years, which is fantastic news in that sense. It's a huge raise, the best in 30 years. Is there hope that something like that will pan out for RPNs?
Yeah, that raise was primarily for RNs. We haven't necessarily seen similar action with practical nurses, and a lot of long-term care homes are not unionized. So that's one union who received that. We are certainly hoping so, that they receive that. It doesn't solve the compression problem if they get the same raise as the people who they should be moving closer to, but I think it will alleviate fill a little of the hole in the bucket.
All right, perfect. Dianne Martin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.